Quad 66. This video is supposed to be this grand shootout of 1S 3-inch motors with the kind of established players with the FPV cycle, the Flywoo, which are both 1202.5s, and then sort of like, I don't know if you call them the outsider, but anyways, these Happy Model 1203 11,000 kV motors. These were actually really kindly sent to me by, it's actually one of our subscribers, one of the subscribers of the channel, James. Really kind of send these motors to me to give them a shot. And I wouldn't have done that myself because I've sworn off Happy Model. But anyways, it was one of the reasons it's really interesting to test these motors is because they are different. They have a slightly taller stator, so they're 1203s. And so that would be really interesting to see is how does the stator affect the performance compared to I have two other motors, nice, well established. And so it'd be nice to kind of like be able to test things around. So the ideal scenario here is if we had not just twin builds like that, but triplets. But I don't. I've got two of these B-Brain brushless boards, and I've got one of these. This is a Beta FPV board, and so this is 1S. Those are both 1 to 2S. This has a slightly shorter dead time. It's an OH5, and these are SH40, 30, 40, something like that. I think 40, yeah. And so, it's not a direct comparison, and then that's a 5, this is a 5 amp ESC, and then these have like the 12 amp. So that always raises some concerns for me of like, how, can you really do that comparison directly like that? Because you've got, potentially confounding variables. And that was the point of me buying these, having two B-Brain brushless boards, even though these boards are ridiculously expensive. It was like part of the point was have twin boards, build them up. That way I could compare like 1S and 2S builds and like battle back and forth. And I really believe that you have to fly them back to back. Because if you don't fly them back to back, you kind of get used to stuff, and then your perception changes and you get used to it and you're like, oh, this is great. And then you fly something else and there's some adjustment period. And unless you're flying back to back, I find it hard to really compare. So because of that, anyways, when I first got these motors, this build used to have the Flywoos. So this is sort of like my workhorse build where these are easy to change the motors out because I've got it mounted diamond style so I can get to those motors. And this is sort of my pretty build. So this is on the Skyrider frame and it builds up real nice and tight. And it's such a clean, nice little build. And on this one, I used to have these FPV cycle motors. But since I was flipping stuff around, I was like, well, let me just go ahead and finish the flip around. Let me put the motors that I prefer on this build, which I'm just going to leave and I'm going to be happy with it and not mess with it. And then these FPV cycle motors, let me give them like one last hurrah in here, and then I'll probably pull them off and move on to doing other stuff. And I was actually kind of curious to flip these motors around on these two boards just to have one more double check. And I was pretty confident. I thought I knew what I was talking about with these FPV cycle motors. And because I had flown them on the old school Crazy Bee F3 boards, that old red 1S board, it's F3. I've also flown them on this Beta FPV F4 board, so 1S board. And I had it on this build with the B-Brain brushless with the 1 to 2S. And on all of those builds, I always felt that this motor was it was a little too mellow for my liking. It flew well, it was easy to control, good efficiency, nice bit of top end power, but just not my thing. I wanted something a little bit crisper and snappier. And then, lo and behold, I put it on this board, and suddenly these motors are a whole lot better, which is, it kind of boggles my mind because this is now, this is the fourth board that I've put these motors on, and it's not till I got to the fourth board that I've put these motors on that suddenly they fly better than they did on any of those other boards. And when I had them on this build, on this Skyrider build with this other B-Brain brushless, these are the same. And by the way, I flashed both of these boards with the same Betaflight 4.2, and I don't know why NewBieDrone, maybe they have released it hopefully at this point in time, but kind of a frustrating thing about NewBieDrone is they don't put out their updates what I feel in a timely manner compared to how Betaflight is, and you can't just go to the Betaflight because they use their custom OSD and you need the hacks from NewBieDrone. But anyways, I set these up exactly the same. I went and tried them both on 24 kilohertz JESC, 48 kilohertz JESC, set all my ESC timing, to the same thing. I set startup to the same thing. I copy and pasted all the diff all from one to the other. So I tried to take out all the factors, and shockingly, it's the board that makes the big difference. So I bought these boards. So these Nubian drum, and I'm supposed to be talking about these motors, and I'll talk to them. But the short of these is happy model is going to happy model. So I hit this on the fence exactly once, and you can see that little magnet popped out there. I'll talk more about those, but anyways, that's happy model. Happy model is going to do what happy model does. But yeah, confounding variables. I spent what I thought was like extra money to get kind of the premium board that was going to be able to test 1S and 2S, and that is going to be more consistent. But these boards haven't been consistent at all. The very first board I bought had some kind of weird efficiency issue where it flew okay, but it was screaming through battery, like it was just choking down batteries faster than other boards. And I spent a bunch of time flipping motors back and forth between other builds, and it was nuts. Like I just, I was comparing things back and forth, and Nuvidrone, eventually they sent me this board. So this is a replacement board for that one. They just sent it out to me. Eventually, and they stood by their product, but it was a bit of pulling teeth. And it was, if you didn't have like a bunch of, different sets of motors to try out back and forth, and you just have no idea. In this case, also too, until I switched these motors, until these motors flip-flopped, I had no idea that these boards fly that different. The only thing I can think of at all that's different on these is the receiver. So this one has the Nuvidrone B-Receiver, and this one has the FR Sky XSR. But I've got them both bound up in D16 mode. I've tried both D8. I've tried D8 on this and D16 mode. But I've got them set up with D16. I'm using just 8 channels, telemetry off, to get kind of the best, the lower latency. And I don't know, I'm about to freaking lose my mind, because it's like, we talk about, so like thrust testing in motors, like people kind of say, you can't trust the thrust testing, and it's like, because, it's going to feel different in the air, and you got to get it up in the air, and you can't just, well, I don't know, at least with thrust testing, you can put it on the same setup and get objective data and compare things like objectively, like apple to apple comparison, and you don't end up with this frickin', like, how do these boards fly that differently? I'm going to go get, I don't feel like dealing with it, but I'm going to get, I'm just going to go get one of those open logger, and I don't know if it's going to show me the thing, but, the truth about it, or like what the difference is, but I'm going to go get one of those open logger, little data loggers, and try and get some black box off of both of these boards, to see if I can figure out, so what do I mean by responsiveness? Responsiveness, partially the throttle and how quick they snap, but also where I notice it the most is on this build, so this B-Brain brushless build. When I go into a split S, on this one I have to kind of jab the stick over. Like I have to jab it over to get, like, and I think when I'm jabbing that stick, what it's doing is really kicking up the feed forward. And that's what gets it to roll over, and versus on this one, it's just a little light touch and boom, it's over. And also you kind of notice it throughout, like when you go back and forth between these, when you get used to this build here, and whether it's on either of the motors. Now I thought the motors, how many boards do I have to go through? I don't know. It turns out it's the board more than the motors. It's crazy. On this one, it's like when you're flying, it just feels like, nice and sensitive, nice and responsive. And if you go then fly this one afterwards, you just feel like the stick, the right stick just feels like it's stuck in mud. But then you fly this for a while, you get used to that, and you jump on this one, you're like, holy cow, I'm totally overdoing everything, and it's moving too much. And I tried to even tune these out. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what's causing it, but can I tune these out? So on this build, I think my P is at like, I forget what it is off the top of my head. It's like 116 or something along those lines, and the D is at 80, so it's like a 115 to 80 on the P to D ratio. On this one, I just started pushing it. I'm like, okay, I took the P up to 130, started getting some oscillations and stuff like with full throttle. So I stopped the P there, and then I started bumping the D down. I got a D all the way down to 55 before I started having bad bounce back on the flips, on the rolls. But even when I did that, so then I was running 130 to 55. So P of 130, D of 55, and this thing still feels like sluggish, like it's stuck in mud on the right stick compared to this build. And they're the same. They're supposed to be the same board. These are like $80 boards. They're supposed to be the same, and they fly so different. It just boggles my mind. So that's confounding variables. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like I wanted to like explore stuff and test stuff out and figure out what's good, what's not good, and I don't know if like, am I really supposed to like buy multiple boards of each thing and like have multiple sets of motors so I can like go back and cross over motors and boards and stuff so I can double check? Like I think about this, I think about all these videos I've watched, like all these reviews where they get one example of the quad or the motor or the board, and then they're like giving you definitive statements. And how do you get definitive statements when it's that different? It's just wild. Boggles my mind. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these motors off of here, and I don't know what to do with this board too, because it's not really, it's like an $80 board, and it's really not good to me because I don't like the way it flies. It's like great, and I don't know, I already got one board from Drone. I don't really feel like dealing with that process again and trying to convince them too that there's a difference, because they're kind of resistant to basically if it flies they think that's within tolerances. And you know, I want to be a Drone fan, I want to support them, but I don't know what's acceptable for, you know, so-called premium products is a bit odd to me. But what I'm going to do, just for sake of thoroughness, is I'm going to throw these Flywoo motors onto this Beta FPV board, and just to check that box and see what they do. So yeah, then, you know, when it comes to, in terms of like, okay, then do I revise my recommendations on motors? I don't know, maybe not. It's hard. Like I can't take this board and fly both motors on this single board at the same time. Like that's the whole point of having the twins. So I can't really say whether I'm 100% confident that this motor is still more responsive than the FPV cycle motor. I can't say. That's just what it comes down to, unless I can fly it on boards that are actually twin boards. So let's talk about, finish up on this 1203 motor. So I thought the 1203 motor was kind of interesting. It did fly a little heavier, a little bit more mass to it, and so easy to fly, nice and stable. And it did have a little extra kick, so it's got a little extra stator height. It's at 1203 instead of 1202.5, and I did feel like that actually gave it a little bit more kick at the top end. It was kind of nice. It was a different motor. And I was going to kind of say, it's like, okay, if you're up flying slightly bigger spaces and you want a little bit more top end, then go for it, give it a shot. You might like it. But you know, if Happy Model is going to fail with one hit, and normally with a motor, I would like, if I had no prior history with Happy Model, I did this one hit, I would blame myself. I said, okay, I hit the fence wrong. It's a metal fence. You know, any motor could fail like that. But this just seems to be a little too on brand for Happy Model. That, you know, one hit and the bell is done. So I think that's just the way they are. The other things too, so this motor, everything moves fast, and that's one of the problems too, is like, I mean, I'd almost be willing, if this is how these boards fly, I'd kind of be willing to just cut my losses on the other one and buy another one if I knew that it was going to come in okay. But then it's like, okay, you've got this one, now you got a V2 board, and the V2 board, it's not just that they put the receiver onto it and bumped down to VTX. If that's all it was, I'd be like, okay, that's no problems. I'm on board with that. I don't need 100 milliwatts on the VTX because I don't fly far with these types of build anyways. I'm fine with 25 milliwatts. But the other thing they did is they also changed out the gyro. So they went to a Bosch gyro instead of using the MPU 6000. I forget the number is on the Bosch, but that's the thing, is I'm trying to like have apples to apples comparisons. I don't want 10 different variations. Like I wanted to do a review on this. This is the Hummingbird board, right? But before I could even get this thing built and tuned, they come out with a V2, and so now it's like I've got the old MPU 6000 or whatever it is, and now they've got the new one has the Bosch. So if like, what good is a review on a quad that, unless you already have it and you know what it is, like nobody's gonna buy this board's gone. It's done. So I'm like, I don't know. But anyways, on these motors, I thought there was some interesting, I thought it was interesting. I think there's room for a 1203 motor. I just think somebody besides Happy Model has to do it to get the quality there. But I think the format, I think it does work. I think it's got potential there. Some other problems on these motors. So these were actually, you know, I was surprised when I first got them before I killed them. I actually had a little bit of high hopes for them. They've got these nice curved magnets. The air gap was nice and tight. And they have a very like nice, they got a nice resolution on the notchiness. Like it's not like a big clunk, gap, big clunk. It's like a nice tick, 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 tick. So it felt pretty good. And they're actually smooth when I spun them up. Seemed pretty well balanced. They did have the dreaded C-clip on top. Just stop doing that, please. Just stop already. But anyways, even these motors, though, these motors are kind of gone. So these, I think they still come on like the Eachine Novice, but if you go to the Happy Model website, now they're just advertising, they're just listing their 1202.5 motor, and that 1202.5, they bumped it up from a 1.5 millimeter shaft up to a 2 millimeter shaft. And what's kind of funny about that is the 1202.5 motor is basically kind of the same weight as these. And even though these have a little bit more stator height, and they're kind of a slightly heavyish motor to begin with, but these, one of the things they did is with that 1.5 millimeter shaft all the way through, they've got these really tiny bearings. So that, if you can see that washer there, that little bushing brass washer, that's about the size that the bearings are tiny, tiny, tiny. Kind of like the gnarly FPVs, or the gnarly FPV motors, 1203s. They do look, I tried to compare, I don't think these motors are the same, made by the same people, even though the bearing is that funny small size, because if you look at like the rest of the stator and the windings, they do look different. Anyways, I had some hopes for this motor. 1203 does still sound promising, but not made by Happy Model. Confounding Variables. Holy cow. The other problem too with the confounding variables is, like, I kind of want to do this, I want to do these comparisons and move on. I want to move on to other fun stuff. So, for example, James really busted out with all kinds of good stuff to try. This is a Cadix Ant Light. I said that this was pretty nice. The weight's pretty good. I think it's like 1.7 grams or something like that, and it'll be even lower after I depin it, because I don't need these plugs. Like, I don't have those plugs. Well, I don't feel like I'm probably not going to adjust it, so I'll pull the adjustment. So one of these you plug in to adjust the settings in the camera. The other one you're supposed to plug in to connect it. But like, why am I going to solder wires with a connector just so I can plug it in? I'm just going to solder it anyways. But excited to try that out, and I'd like to move on and try that out. But what else do I have? Oh, the other thing I wanted to do is, where's the other one that sent me? So this I was really excited about. I was really excited to try. So these are so T65s on these. These are the old AMAX 1103 7500 kV, and this is a really fun build. You know, like sheer performance-wise, is it like as fast as the 3-inch? No, of course not. But it does some things really fun, really well. It has a very different way that it flies, and there's a lot here. Plus, the props too are like the right durability for this size, and so they match up really well. But I always wanted to try this build instead of doing a stack on something lighter. So, but of course, once I start to get around to finally wanting to do that, these motors get discontinued, and AMAX replaces them with those 1103s, the super notchy motor, which were then terrible and died before I could even fly them more than a couple times, and that was horrible. But anyways, one of the other motors I was really interested in were these Brother Hobby 1103s, and I had them like, and so these are 8,000 kV, so it's 1103 motor. you know, Brother Hobby in general, I think has a reasonable reputation for the quality, and so I was really excited to try these and give them a shot, and lo and behold, they turn up. And the way I want to try them is actually with, I'm going to put them on this, so as soon as I get done deciding this whole thing, I'm going to put them on this build to try them with the T65 props, and if I like them, I'm going to do, I've got it designed up, I've got a Warpig 110 that I'm going to build diamond style, and with these little motors flying 2S with the T65 props, and I think that could be just a really, really fun little different build, and it's, they fly different, and if you don't appreciate the different flying characteristics, maybe it's not for you, but if you want things that are small, that fly well, in different ways, then that's interesting. So anyways, excited about those, like to move on, get to those. The other thing I have too, James went off, look. So this is the RD or R3D shifter. I don't know if they call it red shifter, but it's R with a 3 and then a D. So I don't know if you pronounce it red shifter or R3D shifter. Maybe 3D because it's 3D printed. But anyways, this is a nice little frame. Feels pretty light. Should probably weigh it. See what that weighs. That weighs so 7.66 grams, so 7.7 grams. So that's frame plus plus your camera mount canopy, and it's a little bit flexier than carbon fiber. I think that's going to stiffen up a little bit because if you kind of see where it flexes in the middle, and I think when you stick a board in there, they'll probably stiffen that up some, which maybe is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But what I was really curious about this frame, other than it's got some interesting features where, you know, the props are going to be a lot higher up, the battery's further down, the camera's down low, so it kind of gives you a different perspective. And but what I was really curious about this is how does this affect noise? So what I'm going to do is pull. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this build off the carbon fiber frame. And this comes back to, holy cow, like, hopefully these are twins. But it makes me doubt everything. My goodness. So these were supposed to be twin builds. So these are the Flywoo F411 board. And so this is a 2 to 3S board. I think 12 or 15 amp ESCs, but they have black box. So the reason I like these boards is because they have black box on them. And I bought two of them, and there's some changes to these boards. They don't look exactly the same, so hopefully they're not different. And of course now I'm like questioning myself, like, oh my gosh, I built up these two things, and is it really the differences I'm feeling in the motors and the batteries? Because this is the what are these? The Apex Racing. So these are 1202.5, 8,000 kV, 9,000 kV. I think 888 kV, so like 9,000 kV, and then these are the Flywoo Robos, 1202.5, and these are 5,000 kV, maybe 5,500, forget exactly, but 2S, 3S. And there's some definite differences there and some things I like for different reasons, but then I'm wondering, it's like, oh my gosh, how much are these boards really flying the same? But anyways. But the reason I want to pull this one and stick it on this frame is because I'm really interested in getting some black box data to see how the frame material affects the noise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, fly it, get some black box off of it, and then go ahead and move everything over, transplant it over to this, and then fly it some more and get some black box and see how the frame material affects what we're seeing in the noise in the logs. And see, so two theories on it. One is because it's a different material and flexes more, and the way noise and sound and vibrations go through it, it's going to attenuate it more. That's what I'm hoping for. It's like, hopefully it attenuates it. That could be really interesting. Or we're going to get some weird harmonics. We're going to get some weird stuff out of it because it's going to have some strange, resonance or something like that. So it could go either way. The other part that happened too is like, you know, when we're kind of giving this a little twist and bend, I do expect, so this doesn't twist as much, but it's definitely more bendy. So that might affect some flight characters. I don't think so, but weight-wise, what do I think about that? 7.7. Where'd my scale go? And so 7.7, but with the canopy versus, what are we doing? So this is a War Pig. That's the most recent, well, it's a prototype, but it's basically this, weight-wise. And that's 4.2, and my canopies are like 1.5 grams, so 4.2. So 5.7 versus 7.7. So that is a 2 gram penalty on the weight. So that's kind of that's something to consider. So about a 2 gram penalty on the weight. It does, I like the way it looks. And one of the things is, when you see this on camera, the light kind of picks this up and makes this look more like flaws in a sloppy print. At least that's the way I perceived it. In person, in hand, it actually feels kind of nicer than I think it looks on camera. The material, like you can tell, it's sort of like, it seems more like an advanced sort of plastic composite, which is what it is. So what they do with these frames is like, I think it's a nylon carbon. I forget what the mix is, but it's got a composite filament in there. And that's how you get a little bit more of the structural integrity, stiffness out of it. It's still flexy, but it's not as flexy, I think, as some of the other materials, without being brittle. I hope so. But so yeah, there is a little weight penalty. Oh man, but seriously, I'm losing my mind. So I still want twins. But I don't know. And part of what I'm wondering about too, here's the thing I didn't talk about earlier with the confounding variables, is this board. So when I move these motors around, or when the FPV cycle motors, I thought they flew about the same, and I didn't think anything was that weird about this board. And so I kind of wonder, is this board not the one that's away from the mean? Like, did I get a ringer board? Like, is this like what is it, like, is this board doing something weird? Like, is it like in a good way? Like there's something, it's on some edge of variance and it's just like comes together well? Like, and that's the other part too, with like, do I really want to spend $80 and then find out that it's like, this is normal and this is the one in a, 1 in 1,000 lucky one I got? I don't know. I don't know. That's a great way to end a post, just like mumbling to myself. I don't know. I'm exasperated. All right. It's almost like a half hour. Did you make it this far? Did anybody make it this far? If you made it this far, post in the comments. I got to give you some code word or something. I don't know. If you want to, I don't know. I'll do something. Maybe I'll send you I'll send you like a frame or something. Say okay, 2837. Put that in the comment, and this only applies for US. I'm not paying like $50 to ship it someplace crazy, but I'm just curious to see if anybody makes it to the end. But I'll like ship you a frame or something like that if you're in the US. So 2837. All right, till next time. Cheers.